To the cloud. Welcome everybody to Babyproofing Your Relationship with Nicole Burratti. I'm Ashley. I'm the founder of Birthsmarter. We are a community for growing families, people who are pregnant and have little ones. And the community conversation series is a way for us to really come together with experts and people in our community who we admire and want to learn more from. And we bring you in live or post the recording so that we can share what we're learning with you. So Nicole is going to tell us about herself and her journey and what she has to offer all of us in the realm of sex and intimacy and relationships and so many things that I know many of us are trying to sort out, not just with little babies or babies on the way, but also probably in a pandemic when you've been with your partner for a really, really, really long time. And I feel really excited to hear what you have to say and then just open it up for conversation and Q&A after. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Nicole. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to be here. And I'm really excited about Birthsmarter. I think that Ashley has grown an incredible community. I was in the community of birth for 12 years myself and had a similar community, but I think Birthsmarter is better. I was the owner of Bend and Blossom, which was more of a local New York, New Jersey prenatal yoga, in-person childbirth stuff, but I'm doing everything virtually, especially now during the pandemic, is just genius. And you can help so many more people and reach a larger audience. And just the amount of people here today, I'm so excited. I thought, who's going to come listen to a mom talk about sex during pregnancy and parenthood? But here I am. Like I said, was a doula and childbirth educator, prenatal yoga teacher for 12 years. And I was discovered by Cosmo magazine to be a mom who talks about sex for women in general, but especially for parents and through the pregnancy stage. And even most of my clients are actually going through the IVF journey. So I saw that someone, Elizabeth, is on the IVF journey. Yeah, congratulations. 28 weeks. I hope you're feeling good. I love questions. So I like the interaction of what you want to know. Otherwise, I could talk about sex and parenting forever. But I want to know what you want to know. So I will be checking the chat throughout, and feel free to unmute and ask me anything that you would like to know. I think that no question is a silly question. And I think if you have the question, so do most other people. So my personal journey started obviously as a mom. I was in my early 30s and became pregnant with my first child as a single mom with somebody I just started dating. And so there was no lack of connection in my relationship. It was all sort of just about me. And I wondered what it would be like being pregnant, feeling the way I'm feeling, and having a partner with me all the time. And so I didn't really get that in my first experience. But then 6 years later, I had my second child with my husband, who I'm now married to. And I realized that it was amazing to have the support that I had in the pregnancy, but also in the intimate side of things and the respect that I got, because during some pregnancies, we really want to be intimate. And in other pregnancies, we are more like the cat who's like, don't touch me, don't come near me. And every pregnancy is different. So in my second pregnancy, I was more like that cat, like, don't come near me, don't touch me. And my partner was extremely supportive and understanding of that. I forgot to say my disclaimers. One, I have a dog he's still a puppy. He's 2.5 years old, and he's totally wild and attached to me. So he might come in and share my seat with me. The other is that I'm a huge advocate of pregnancy and birth your way. And third, I am a mom to 3 boys, ages 15, 8, and 5. So anyway, back to my story. With my second, I was more like that. With my third, it was more like, all right, I'm ready to be more intimate during this pregnancy. While in my first, I was the most craving intimacy and wanting to be with someone where I didn't have that. So it was really interesting how all three were different, and I had a different experience in my intimacy with each pregnancy. So one day I wrote something on Instagram about how I wanted to focus more on the hormone balance and the intimacy of hormones. And here I am talking about sex on the internet. So I love what I do, and I have some questions coming in, which is awesome. I heard how penetrative sex can be pretty painful the first couple of times, up to a year, starting one's sex life after giving birth. Is the orgasm as painful? As in, do you recommend using a vibrator or masturbating? Okay.
Wait,
so
before you answer that question,
yeah,
can you do like a bigger picture? I have so many thoughts on, you know, when and how people are returning to having sex or being intimate, or like, in your mind, what are the factors that just go into that basic question? So you have a baby.
right.
And
I was
then,
going to wait on that question.
yeah, like mainstream is then at 6 weeks, you're like cleared to be intimate again. And
Yeah.
so just like unpack that for us first.
Very few of us are ready at 6 weeks, first of all. But I'll say that during the pregnancy, during trying to get pregnant, first of all, sex is different. And then during the pregnancy, sex is different. Postpartum, sex is different. After those first 6 weeks, when things are back to normal, now there's a child or 3 children involved, sex is different. So there's a piece of the puzzle throughout the entire journey. So in early pregnancy, you're usually too tired or too sick to engage. And your partner might be like, well, what's going on? You're pregnant. What's the big deal? Like, we did the job. We went through the IVF, got a positive test. What's the big deal? They don't understand what's going on from the inside, right? Because there's so many physical changes going on the inside of us that our partners don't necessarily see that until they start to see the growing belly. Then they're like, oh, how do I literally fit in, or figuratively fit into this equation? Like, positions change, dynamics change, the orgasm changes, and so on. Then we get closer to labor and we hear, because we read on the internet, or even some of our doctors and midwives will tell us, our doulas will definitely tell us, sex gets the baby out. Now we want to have sex more often because we're ready to give birth and we're coming up on our due date, or we're past our due date, and we are trying to avoid induction. And so our partner starts to feel like, all right, well, let's do this. And it's sort of like the very beginning when we were trying to get pregnant and everything was scheduled and we wanted to do it more often. And then the baby comes along and you are abstinent for 6 or 8 weeks. And now the 6 and 8 weeks are up and your partner is wondering, when are we going to get back to normal? So a lot of intimacy and sex during and after pregnancy affects our partner a lot more than we realize. And so I really do like to talk about the partner even before we talk about ourselves, because ourselves, it's obvious. But what we don't realize is our partner is a part of this equation, and having the conversation of what's going on and why we feel the way we feel at each stage is really important. So I think that the foundation in every relationship is communication. The foundation to great sex is communication. So it's not necessarily, for me working with clients on my how-tos, it's how to communicate how we're feeling and why we don't or we do crave sex at this time. So opening that conversation and then checking in with ourselves frequently. What's going on with me? Why do I feel the way I feel? They told me 6 weeks I can have all the sex I want, but that doesn't seem like a great idea. And for most women, sex at 6 or 8 weeks doesn't feel like we're ready to do it again. We just don't feel physically there, and we also don't feel emotionally there. And I think that the reason that we're not emotionally there is because now we have another person whose lifeline depends on us. And so we're giving our body so much throughout the day, 24/7, to another person, that feeling touched out is very real. And feeling like I just want to be me for a minute. And I want to take a shower by myself. I want to be able to pee by myself. And now it's like an adult partner also wants to touch me and be with me, and that's great. But we also need that pause time to get our head in the game. So having your head in the game is the second step. So we start with communication and then getting the head in the game. How do we get our head in the game to go from being a mom to being a partner in the bedroom? It's a big one. It's my biggest piece of the giant puzzle. And that comes from self-care. It all starts with self-care being number one, and having that time, that space just for ourselves, right? So think of the professional woman who goes to work all day long and she has a commute, which we're not having right now because of pandemic. We're not having our commute. We're going right from our office to the kitchen, to the bedroom, myself included. I no longer have anywhere to go to get that space that I need for myself, even if it's a yoga class during pandemic. But for most of us, I'm seeing a lot of us live in New York. I live in New Jersey, and I'm originally from New York. But when we work in New York and we live in Brooklyn, we have that commute from the office to home. And that's a great time to just let your hair down and say, okay, I'm going from CEO to mom. And then from mom into the shower, washing the hair, letting the hair down a little bit more, to now I'm this person's partner, and you're entering the bedroom. So throughout the day, we're in the office, then we're mom in the kitchen and laundry room, and then we're partner in the bedroom. But at the same time, we're still mom, we're still partner, and we're still CEO. So we're wearing all of these different hats throughout the day, but how do we make the space and the time to be each one of them throughout the day? And so time management is a piece of self-care. Any questions so far on communication or self-care?
Definitely just want to jump in and think about this with you, because I have broached the topic with lots of our clients in terms of there's going to be a range in terms of when you're ready, and have thought about the getting your head in the game piece. Just definitely before I can have sex or be intimate in some way, I need to take a shower by myself and take a walk by myself. But I hadn't really thought about it with the identity shifting piece and how many different hats you're wearing. And this is a bigger thought or question for you, but I just haven't seen a lot of people writing or talking about how our jobs are so compartmentalized. And that just feels like a general struggle with the postpartum identity shift.
Yes.
And I'm in a unique position of I weave caretaking into my job, but it is I have to go play dinosaurs, and then I have to cook food, and then I have to, hire an assistant, and turning that brain off, especially when mothers or primary parents are the one that are carrying that emotional load and the mental load and burden. So I have so many more things in my brain than I'm
Yes.
able to accomplish during the day when I get into bed or like the kids are asleep. I'm 2 hours away from turning my brain off.
Exactly. And that's it exactly, is turning your brain off from one role into the next. And before we started today, I was telling you about how I just took some time away from my business, and my business is my fourth child. I took my time away from my business to focus more on my three children and on my husband and just what this big picture looks like. And I feel like I'm coming back with a much clearer picture and a bigger picture. I'm able to see things from a different perspective rather than being in it all the time. It's kind of like the pool looks different when we're in the pool playing volleyball than when we're on the outside of the pool watching the family play volleyball. So I took that time between Christmas and about a week or two ago of being on the outside and just looking at what's going on and where needs fixing and where needs more attention from me. And what I've come up with is actually my husband was the one who needed a little bit more attention from me. Go figure. I'm supposed to be the sex expert. And we have spent so much more time together in the past 6 weeks, and things have really changed and improved drastically in only 6 weeks in taking that time.
So here's a question came in to me privately that I'll read, but I think it's related to that because I think a lot of people are in a situation postpartum where how do you get that time when you have a little baby? It's different when your kids
Yes.
are older and they can, kick a soccer ball or watch a movie and you can sit for 2 hours or bedtime is predictable. So here's the question that came in. For this couple, sex is different as in it's rarely happening. They were advised not to have sex during the beginning of the second trimester because of placenta previa, and then had a cesarean. And following the cesarean, there was sleep deprivation and then transitioning back to work. And so sex is at the very bottom of the list. So how common is that in your experience? And then it feels like a really big event to prepare for and possibly uncomfortable. So what advice would you give in that situation?
I think that is 99% common. I think that, especially when you're starting second trimester with placenta previa and you're put on bed rest or pelvic rest, it comes as a shock because it comes out of left field. And here you are in your second trimester when you're supposed to be feeling your best and craving sex more than ever during your second trimester. And you're told you can't do it. And even self-orgasm is off the table. And I think that causes more of like a trauma to the body. And I'm using the word trauma loosely here. It's a trauma where, that kind of thing doesn't happen every day. And then a baby comes into the picture and it changes the dynamic of the relationship. When we go from couplehood into familyhood, it changes for everybody. Becoming a mother changes us on a cellular level. And so it's not just the fact that a child came into the picture. Your body is different. Your brain is different. Everything about you has changed, and it's changed very quickly. We do lose ourselves as women. We now become that mom who has a lot more on her mind. And we just a lot of us tend to let ourselves go. We tend to let our selves of who we are and who we were go. And then we get to a point where we miss it. And how we get that back is taking advantage of all of the help that's offered to us, whether it's parents, babysitters, friends, anybody. In the beginning, I say in that first month, allow yourself 1 hour to be out of the house, even if it's to go to the grocery store by yourself. In the second month, 2 hours. Go to the grocery store and maybe get your nails done or a haircut. Third month, 3 hours until the baby is about a year old. And then when the baby is a year old, you take more time. They say take a weekend when the baby is about 18 months old. If you have the luxury of that support. My husband and I have never really had the luxury of that support, never. And somehow I've made it work. And yes, I changed. I became the mother. I became that person with a whole lot more responsibility. I became the woman who no longer was speeding on the highway in the left lane. I became the middle lane driver once I became a mom, but I still managed to make time for myself by taking advantage of every little helper that I could possibly get on board. Even if it was the teenager at daycare who said, hey, I'm looking for a little extra cash on the weekends. I was like, hired. I'll take you. You know, come to my house Saturday at 10 so that I can go to a yoga class and get my hair done. So my husband and I have parents who are not really local to us. My mom is in Brooklyn. My father-in-law is in central New Jersey, and they just don't babysit. And so getting that time for just me and my husband has always been a challenge, but we make it work. And now they're older. The youngest is 5, but the oldest is 15. The youngest is 5. And so we put the 15-year-old in charge for a couple of hours, and we go to dinner every Friday night. Every Friday night, as long as the restaurants are open, and New Jersey hasn't had outdoor dining only since summer. But as soon as the restaurants were open again, we were out having that date night, and keeping that date night, even when you're pregnant, have 3 children, have no babysitter, you get creative and you make it work. So putting the kids in their beds an hour earlier, putting the baby to sleep, and taking an hour to sit on the living room floor with a sushi picnic is still a date, right? So getting creative in making that time for yourself and for you and your partner.
Okay, so what I appreciate is, first, before even doing date night and before like connecting emotionally with your partner, I'm definitely getting the sense from you that it is about filling up your own cup and like working on that. And I think that that's so important, especially thinking personally about some of the people here that I know. Like, don't do a date night. Like, first do a self date night. Like, I'm going out, I'm getting dinner, I'm going for a walk, I'm going to the chiropractor. And then once I feel a little bit more of like a human being, then I can do date night with you. So I think that's really important. And then
even 15 and 5 years later, every Sunday night, my husband takes care of the kids so that I do my bath, tea, and a facial. And I'm in bed watching TV by like 9 o'clock. He takes care of the kids so that I have that alone time.
My mind is blown right now. I'm like, I have to get off this call and go take a bath.
Every single Sunday night. Yes.
Okay, that's a great lesson for people. So then here's the second part of that question, and then the question that we read earlier. So for someone who is now months, right? You well know that you're not going to have sex 6 weeks postpartum, but now it's 3 months postpartum or 6 months postpartum, and it's something that you've been avoiding or you're uncomfortable about it. And now it's building up in your mind, right? As like, this is something we have to do. How do we do this? So do you have strategies around that? And then we can address the question that came in about like, is it painful if it's penetrative sex? Is it just orgasm? Logistically, what are we talking about?
I have a similar question. So I was actually going to address the 3 to 12 months postpartum of sex and discomfort and what it looks like. So first of all, getting privacy in that first year to 18 months can be a challenge, especially my fourth disclaimer. I'm a huge advocate of attached parenting. I co-slept with my children until they decided that they were out of my bed. And for my first child, that was 6 years. So getting creative, first of all. There are other rooms in the house. There are other types of furniture other than the bed. There's For some of us, if we don't live in Brooklyn, we have a guest room, getting creative. But physically, for a lot of women, especially if you're breastfeeding, vaginal dryness is a condition that a lot of our doctors and midwives don't discuss with us after delivery. And so vaginal dryness can occur from pregnancy, from breastfeeding, just from postpartum. It can also happen later as you enter perimenopause and then menopause and postmenopause. So I say that throughout the entire lifespan, lube is important. Lube is skincare for down there. And so finding a nice water-based lube for daily use for your regular sex life, and then silicone-based for anal sex. But every day we should be taking care of our vulva just like we take care of the skin on our face. And my recommendation for all women is after a shower or after swimming to use fractionated coconut oil on the outside of the vulva. That will definitely help with vaginal dryness, and using coconut oil on your vulva actually increases your natural lubrication. And so that does make sex better and easier. As far as the 6 weeks postpartum, a lot of us are not ready. We're still healing. And so I say, don't rush it. Have sex when you're ready. Just because they say 6 or 8 weeks doesn't mean that you have to go for it at 6 or 8 weeks. But when you are ready, just talk to your partner about really easing into it, whether it's mutual masturbation, it's penetration, it's a vibrator. However, your definition of sex and intimacy looks, ease into it slowly and take a lot of deep breaths. And if it's too painful, communicate. I'm not ready. And use lots of lube.
Okay, Nicole, I heard not opposite advice. This was from a former client and I hadn't heard it before. And part of me thinks it's a slippery slope depending on people's personal history. And part of me thinks it's brilliant. But they were just like, somebody told us to get super drunk. And then
Midwife told me that.
Yeah. Midwife
told me that after having my second baby. Get drunk, drink a bottle of wine, and use a lot of lube. I don't think that that's the best advice.
Okay. Right? Because then, I mean, it's going to depend on everybody's relationship, but I'm just thinking, especially the question that came in earlier, when somebody feels so this has gotten so big and scary and it's just something that has to happen again, it's just about facing that fear and communicating and going slowly. But having the presence of mind is probably going to be better.
Yes, absolutely. Because you're going to be more aware of the sensations or the pain.
Yeah. Okay.
If there is any pain. There should not be pain. Discomfort.
Yeah.
Maybe. Pain, no. Fractionated coconut oil, I just want to address that. I can't remember the name of the brand that I use. It's in a clear bottle with a white cap. It's one of the most popular fractionated coconut oils out there in my area anyway. And again, I'm in New Jersey. But I would say anything that you're going to eat, nothing with fragrance in it.
Okay.
What were you going to ask, Ashley?
There was that specific question that penetrative sex can be painful, and you're saying that it shouldn't be. So can we talk about the reasons for that? Why might it be painful?
I'm sorry, I was reading a comment.
Yeah.
Why might
penetrative sex
be painful?
And then I'll link you here because where my brain is going. And then how does it relate to pelvic floor physical therapy?
Yes, I think that every woman who has been pregnant should see a pelvic floor physical therapist after giving birth, just like they do in France. Unfortunately, America is 30 years behind France on that issue. And that is a whole other Zoom meeting. But yes, I think that if you're experiencing any kind of pelvic pain, come on. if you're experiencing any kind of pelvic pain, you should definitely see a physical therapist who specializes in the female pelvic floor. And I have tons of resources all over the country for that, because part of my training is actually with physical therapists for the pelvic floor. I'm not a physical therapist, but I've trained with the physical therapists.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons is pregnancy itself, just the weight of pregnancy on the pelvic floor. It can be a vaginal delivery that causes pelvic floor dysfunction, but not in your typical healthy cases. If you've had an episiotomy, you can experience pelvic pain. Again, episiotomies are not being done in most parts of the country any longer, but there are still some hospitals local to me that everyone gets an episiotomy no matter what. And putting that back together can cause pelvic discomfort. You can have pelvic pain from past trauma, from past sexual trauma, from past sexual abuse. There can be emotional scarring. And as a yoga teacher, we go very deep into the emotional scarring that women hold in their pelvic area, in their pelvic region, their pelvic bowl. So the muscles and the bones hold a lot of our emotions. It's sort of like that's our pocket where we tuck our old stuff away that we don't want to address. And so vaginal dryness can contribute to pelvic pain. And yes, I agree that going back to the midwife, I just got a comment that I want to say, that comment that my midwife said to me and that your past client said about the alcohol, that can cause pelvic pain, right? But that's super triggering for somebody who has had an alcohol issue in the past, who has trauma from alcoholism in the family. And I wish I could do something about midwives and doctors who are telling women to drink alcohol to have better sex. Alcohol and sex do not go together. Alcohol sex is, we call it drunk sex, and then we call sober sex, obviously sober sex. And sober sex is so much better than drunk sex in so many ways. There's the emotional connection that happens in sober sex that does not happen when we've been drinking. And so I just kind of wanted to jump back to that to address the comment that I just got.
I think that's really interesting and connects with what I know more about your story and how you got into this with oxytocin, right? So just to like elaborate this on for people who are listening and watching. So there is a lot of symmetry between sex and orgasm and the hormones of sex and orgasm and labor and delivery, right? So
yes.
You and I can separately geek out a ton on, I'm so sorry. I don't know if you can hear my kids are screaming.
That's okay. Mine are doing the same thing.
So orgasm is the result of oxytocin in our body, right? And oxytocin is our love and trust and bonding hormone. And when we're teaching birth classes, we want to teach you all about producing oxytocin so that you're ready to have these big, powerful contractions in labor. But we want that big release of oxytocin in sex for powerful orgasm. And that's one part of it. And then the other part is like your pelvic floor muscles being able to relax and contract well. And so everything that we could talk about for, hey, this is what you want to consider for having sex and having really good sex postpartum is actually all going to really help you prepare to have this baby.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's so
On a hormonal level, yes, we could totally geek out on the oxytocin thing. And again, the alcohol is going to zap any oxytocin that's involved in sex. Just like a lot of the drugs in the epidural will zap any of the oxytocin that's happening during the labor process. And we're talking natural, real oxytocin. So not the oxytocin that comes in the bottle, in the bag that says oxytocin on it. That's actually Pitocin. I love how they call it oxytocin at the hospital when it's synthetic Pitocin. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then what I actually don't know the answer to this. So can you tell us more what you have in your community? Like you have a Facebook group, and then do you do like private consultation? So if somebody's in the situation um, where they want to reinitiate an intimate relationship with their partner and it feels like big, right? And they want some more support around there. What are resources that you offer? And then what are other resources that exist for people to read or watch or listen to help, to help them?
I have the Facebook community, which is a great resource of, I don't know, 1,000 women who are really supportive of each other, really respectful of each other. They respect each other's boundaries and they give each other sound advice because they've been following me for as long as I've been doing this, most of them. And so they would answer almost as if it's like, what would Nicole say? You know, they've been trained by me. I do take only a small number of coaching clients per month. I'll take no more than 4. I have clients as far away as Australia, and I start with them at 5 in the morning, and I'll work with clients even in Australia and New Zealand until 10 p.m. So there's such a huge time difference, which is why I only take 4 clients per month on the max. And I like to give my absolute, as much as I can, attention to each one of my clients because I was a doula and I treat each one of my clients as if I'm their doula. I'm with them throughout the whole process. And like I said, most of my clients at this point right now, 2 of them are pregnant and 2 of them are going through the IVF journey. And 1 is in Australia, 1 is in New Zealand, 1 in New Jersey, and 1 in New York. So I have 4 clients at the moment. I think 2 of my clients are going to be graduating very soon. And then maybe we'll be back later.
What does it look like when someone graduates? Like, what are the milestones you're looking for?
So my client in Australia has graduated twice with me. Once it was they gave up on IVF and they said, okay, whatever happens, happens. And now they're back on the IVF journey. So they graduated the first time when they said, okay, we're just going to sort of take a break from IVF and see what happens. And so they got their relationship to the place where they needed to be without the IVF. And now they're back on the IVF journey. So yeah, and they have their relationship where they want to be for the IVF. So we work a lot on relationship and where they are in the relationship.
And so then going back to the other question, do you have other resources for folks?
Yes.
Yeah.
I also have a podcast. It's Sex Talk with Nicole. So everything online right now is Sex Talk with Nicole. You can always email me. I do email private questions, and you can Facebook me or send me an Instagram message. I do answer individual questions. Yeah, and then I have a magazine. It's a digital magazine, and we also do print. It's called Sex Talk Magazine, but we might be rebranding that to be Intimate Details Magazine. But for now, it is Sex Talk Magazine. I wanted to answer another question. It's a little bit off topic, but balancing yeast and BVF infections, that's a big one with a lot of my clients. I had a client who, she graduated, we were seeing each other over the summer, and she had chronic yeast and bacterial vaginosis. Not necessarily a pregnancy or a parenting sex question, but that's something that really needs to be addressed, 1, through diet and lifestyle, and 2, with your doctor or midwife. So I think this is where modern medicine really comes in handy for zapping the problem with bacterial vaginosis. And then eating a really clean diet, eliminating caffeine, white sugars, alcohol, trans fats, fast food, and really eating, homemade, clean foods without all of the processing, and even avoiding some spices, keeping your diet nice and clean. I just want to see if there are any other questions as well before I open
And if
the.
folks who are on here want to type any in before we wrap up, you can get a last question in for sure.
Is orgasm painful after giving birth? I have found in my experience in working with my clients that orgasm has been found to be more painful for some people during pregnancy rather than after. Because when we have an orgasm as women, it's the entire uterus that is vibrating, right? So before pregnancy, your uterus is only the size of your fist. And then after pregnancy, it goes right back to about the size of your fist. So we feel this, but we feel it a little bit and it feels good. As the pregnancy progresses and we become up to 40 weeks pregnant, the uterus can be the size of a blown up balloon. And those muscles being stretched out and the nerves being further away from each other can actually feel new to us, which can be uncomfortable to us because it's such a large organ that's vibrating. But it actually gives the baby a massage. The baby likes orgasm. One, because they're getting that sensation. And two, they're getting a dose of your oxytocin hormone, which is familiar to them and feels good for them. And babies should get a dose of oxytocin because oxytocin is the happy hormone just as often as they're getting a little bit of that stressor hormone, so that happy feelings and stress feelings are familiar to them. And we have throughout our day these feelings that go up and down, right? And so that's life, goes up and down. And so it becomes familiar to the child. We go up and we return to normal. We go up and we return to equilibrium. And so a little bit of stress is actually okay for your baby.
Do you have a question? I just got
Yes.
another one. Okay, I see it. I'll read it out while you're answering. Any suggestions for explaining to partners how we're feeling, what's going on with our bodies? I have a 10-month-old and living and working all under one roof with lots of togetherness doesn't put me in the mood.
I'm trying to think of resources for partners. I mean, tell your partner that you watched this webinar and what a big part of the conversation was headspace, and getting into that headspace and having all of this chaos. It doesn't work for us women. Where our male counterparts, their hormones are up and down throughout a day. But for women, it takes an entire month. So it takes us longer hormonally to get in the mood, where for the male species, it's faster for them to sort of recover. Same.
I got another question I'll read to you in a second, but what I wanted to share on that is I do think that for a lot of the relationships and couples that we support, sex and returning to sex postpartum and sort of this idea of baby-proofing your relationship, it's an entry point into a much, much, much larger conversation.
Yes.
And so it's going to kick up sexism, it's going to kick up the patriarchy, it's going to kick up the mental load, it's going to kick up how much you're doing to take care of your 10-month-old baby and put food on the table and clean up your house. And
right.
So the resources I would share around that are, there's a book called Fair Play by Eve Rodsky that partners can read that talks about partners taking on more work. There's a book that has like a very gendered title, but How to Not Hate Your Husband After Kids, that talks about that. And I think both of those are great books for partners to read. The Gottman Institute is like they focus on healthy relationships, and they have a book called And Baby Makes Three.
Oh, that's a great one. Yes.
Yeah, I can put all these in the chat. And
one
so
of my favorite for reconnecting. So I'll say, like, date your partner again, right? Date just like you did in the beginning, but you have to get creative with that time management piece, because you might have to have your picnic on the living room floor. the 5 languages of love, because our partners change after having a baby too. And so a lot of times it's like, what did I love about my partner? And we have to ask ourselves, both partners, what was it about my partner that we clicked? Because we tend to forget when a baby comes into the picture. But yes, I can only talk to the hormonal side of things and how the fluctuations for women and men differ. But yes, the patriarchy stuff does come into play when we start to talk about the dynamics of parenting.
Yeah, so I just put them into the chat, and I think the Gottman Institute is a really great place in general for trying to tackle the bigger picture, like how do we communicate? And there was just a Brene Brown Unlocking Us podcast with John and Julie Gottman on it, which is something nice to listen to. Okay, I'm gonna actually put this question into the chat box for everybody, but I'll share it privately. So how do you move through the grief of losing some of the pleasure of sex with your partner prior to giving birth towards finding joy in an experience where many things feel different, or it's just not as pleasurable as it was before?
I think this is a great question that I could probably make a whole topic out of for a webinar. I think that women who give birth, women who adopt, it's the primary caregiver. For a lot of us, we lose pleasure physically and emotionally. We just, again, it's that headspace thing because our role has changed and we're no longer just me in this body, but I'm me plus a lifeline in this one body. And so we're pulled in so many different directions. But my number one tip is finding pleasure in yourself and doing what it takes to get that pleasure in yourself back, whether it's taking that hot bath or using a vibrator. The more orgasms that you have, the more orgasms becomes available to you. So again, it's that hormone roller coaster, right? We want to keep the momentum. Who wants to talk? We want to keep that momentum of oxytocin going, because then oxytocin is more accessible to us. So the more orgasms we have, the more easily they come to us, if that makes sense. On the flip side, it might be the relationship that needs to be looked at. It might be, what dynamics changed since having a baby. And do we want to get back to who we were before, or do we not? And how to get back to where we were, or what to do about the worst case scenario of not wanting to get back to where we are. And I see it happen. I see it happen very often in a lot of my doula clients where they thought they wanted to have babies together and the relationship was just no longer there after they had babies. Yeah, unfortunately, after having 3 babies sometimes.
Yeah, that's so interesting. The orgasm piece is really fascinating to me and something I hadn't thought about so clearly, but I think that could be empowering to some people, and gives you some agency, right, in terms of taking control back for yourself. But it's true. And then the pelvic floor piece, I just feel like there's sometimes a body work component to it. And I feel what's interesting about my experience in COVID has been feeling touched out because I'm trapped in a house with all of these people and just, yeah, so stuck, but also like very undertouched. And I think a lot of people feel that way in the pandemic, where like, I think a massage therapist could charge me $4,000 and like I would go as soon as it felt safe for me to do that in my community. So some people are safely getting body work and that's a great thing to do. But I do think that too, right, as postpartum, can you get a massage? Can you go to acupuncture? Like, who are the other people caring for your body so that you feel like it's being nurtured in the way that you need it?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So does anybody have any questions that they want to jump in and ask?
I will also thank everybody for coming and share that you are Nicole at sextalkwithnicole.com. And I'm going to stop the recording and then folks can ask questions.